In this session, we're gonna, start really talking about, all right, now that we have a framework, as we've talked about in previous sessions, what do we do to start training intuition so that it becomes this amazing tool that we can leverage to bridge the gap to who we want to become and what we want to create in our life, right? Like literally bridge the gap to anything that is important to you. And that's a key word, important to you, relative to creation and part of how we start training intuition. And so, just a quick reminder, right? Intuition does not tell you what it is you want to create. You've got to do that job. You've got to give the right framework or present the right framework in order to leverage intuition to produce the outcomes for yourself and your life that you aspire to create, right? So that means you've got to define what you want and get clear on the outcome result that you want to aspire to. Number two, it's not gut feeling, emotional pattern, or a magical force, right? It's a higher brain function that when you give the brain and your psyche, your unconscious self, the right information in the right quantity with the right focus and framework being maintained, it'll go to work on your behalf and it's going to figure out the puzzle and essentially what are the things that need to happen to go from where you want to the outcome that you want to achieve. And intuition will be in the driver's seat, ensuring that these outcomes become the future and the reality of your life, okay? And so let's dive into how do we start training it. So first, those frameworks have to be in place. If those frameworks aren't in place, then a couple of these training tools that we're going to cover in this session are essentially not going to be effective. You've got to go back and make sure that framework is on point. And if you're like, what framework? Go to the previous sessions and check them out because we kind of gave you that overview. Or just come to Power of Intuition and do the weekend, and we can get it all dialed there, right? And so the two elements that are really important in order to give intuition those raw materials that it needs so your higher brain function can do the job of bridging the gap is number one, we've got to not only define emotional importance, but we've got to reiterate it consistently until the outcome happens, and then we've got to continue to reinforce it so that we maintain the result, so we hold the result. And so here's some examples of how sometimes emotional importance is defined on people's behalf, and intuition starts working on their behalf because they accidentally put these elements into place, right? Which is part of how I kind of got obsessed about understanding this process of intuition and how it creates on people's behalf. And so when you look at transformation, as I'm known for saying, it's an instantaneous moment. Transformation really does happen in an instant, and then it unfolds over time, right? And so maybe you've gone to a doctor's appointment, or you've had a friend who's gone to a doctor's appointment, or something like this, and they go, "Oh, you're pre-diabetic, and here's what's coming for you," right? And they understand the rapid decline in their health that's about to happen. And for some reason, and it doesn't mean this is going to strike everybody, because some people get this message from like their doctor, their physician, and they go, well, I seem to be fine now, and no emotional impact happens. But then other people get this message, and they think about the decline in their life and what they're not going to be able to do with their children in the future, and how they're not maybe going to see their grandkids, and how they might end up in a wheelchair, and how they're going to have to, jab themselves with needles and energy and they start understanding what it really means relative to the life that they're not going to get to live. And man, there's just an emotional impact, right? It just strikes them, and they go, I have to do something about my health. And then all of a sudden they focus on health and vitality and optimal health and the way that they want to be and getting on track, and they make that a focus, right? They clearly name and define what they want, and then all of a sudden they start obsessing about it, partly because of the fear of what they don't want to answer to, but then they think about, man, I'll be there for my grandkids, and I'll be able to live a much longer life, and I'll have much more fulfillment in my life if I accomplish this outcome. And then boom, emotional importance is now established, and that emotional importance is the driving force that motivates the action toward the outcome. But more important, it's that emotional impact, the emotional intensity that tells the brain and the higher brain functions responsible for intuition what its job is and what needs to go from the unconscious self into the conscious self. And it starts to define that emotional importance is what defines what we need to pay attention to in our environment, what we must start to seek out that's going to be relative to or the context of the outcome that we're aspiring to create, right? So it's like emotional importance can be established on our behalf, and occasionally it works out for us. Majority of the time when emotional importance is established on our behalf and we don't realize that it's happening, it tends to work against us, right? So like a lot of times, people go, oh man, I'm inspired and I want to make a lot of money, and they take some risks and they start investing dollars and they lose their money. And then they go, oh my God, I'm afraid of investing and I failed and I lost all this money. And then all of a sudden emotional importance, gets us focused on saving or trying to eliminate debt. And that becomes what our focus is, or the outcome is we pay attention to. And then all of a sudden we're not producing wealth, and actually we create more debt inadvertently, and we struggle financially because emotional importance got established on our behalf through an event in life like a bad investment, that happened. And so we don't want to feel that pain again. Or sometimes we take on emotional importance from, our environment, people who are well-meaning around us, and we take on their emotional patterns around money, finance as an example, that accidentally define emotional importance. And then, our expectation of the outcome of finances that we're going to aspire to. And now all of a sudden we misfire because of emotional importance. So what I invite you to do is, once you name what it is you want, align emotional importance with that, and you can do it by starting to ask two questions with consistency. Number one, and the key word here is imperative. Why is it imperative that I produce this outcome? Why is it imperative that I produce this outcome in two directions? Why is it imperative? For the increased quality of life that I'm going to know. Like, what am I going to get to know and have if I create this outcome? And if you're naming the things that are the quote unquote positive or affirmative reasons as why you should create that, you got to check in as you're naming those things, right? Like if it's health and vibrancy, it's like, hey, I'll be able to mountain bike and enjoy the activities I love doing for the rest of my life. And I'll have the energy to be there with my grandkids and play with them and, do their activities and watch them in their sports. And I'll be able to travel and like make sure when you kind of pause and take a moment that you feel an emotion there, that you feel passion, you feel inspired, you feel excited, you feel lit up inside. If you don't feel anything, then emotional importance is not being established. And so make sure that as you're naming the things, like, hey, why is it imperative that I create this so that I get so that I will know these positive things in my life? Well, what are those positive things that you'll get to know if you create that outcome? And then ask the question on the other side of it. What are the negative things that I'll avoid if I create this in my life? And, like the diabetes example I gave you, it's like, hey, I'll avoid a wheelchair. I'll avoid a shortening of life, not being there for my kids, missing out. A lot of pain and discomfort in the body will be avoided. And then same thing, when you're naming the things that you're going to avoid, look inside, pay attention, and man, do I feel a need, a must, a conviction, maybe even a fear around those things not happening. And so, that question is how you establish emotional importance and link it and tie it to the outcome that you aspire to, that you want intuition to start paying attention to and supporting, on your behalf to create. And so again, that question is, why is it imperative that I produce this outcome? What are the positive affirmational things that I'll get to know and realize if it happens? And what are the negative and contracting, painful things that I'll avoid? And be willing to be in and re-acknowledge that conversation with yourself on a regular basis. And then step 2, focus, is as simple as rename your vision on a daily basis. Yes, I said daily basis. Matter of fact, it's better if you think about the outcome you want to achieve 3 times a day, 5 times a day, 10 times a day, because when you think about it, when you decide you want something, you obsess about it in some way, right? And it is that consistent focus and obsession that tells intuition that this needs to be paid attention to, right? When you are starting to think about the process of buying a new car, You don't go, oh, like I'm going to think about it for 5 minutes. You see cars all day long. You start telling people the cars you're interested in. You think about it a lot up until the moment you purchase it, and then it's done, and now you go on to focusing on something else. So obsess about the life you're creating as though it's going to happen, and make sure you're as committed with your focus on the life you're designing as we get around those shorter term events, right? When you're looking to plan a vacation, you're searching the web, you're really thinking about it a lot with consistency day after day after day after day after day. So that's the key with focus, is acknowledge and re-acknowledge to yourself that which you're aspiring to and what you want to create a minimum once a day. At the beginning of every day, put your focus on the outcome that you want to achieve. And then number 2, re-acknowledge at least once a day, affirm and acknowledge, why is it imperative that I create that outcome, right? What are the benefits that I'm going to get to know? What are the positive reasons to create that as it pertains to my life? And what are the negative things I'll avoid? What are the painful things I'll avoid if I create that, right? And that will establish emotional importance on your behalf. Down the road, if you come be trained, we'll talk about other training tactics and techniques to really train and hone intuition. But the more you make this a lifestyle, you just are consistently training and developing the capacity for intuition at a higher and higher and higher and higher level, the better you will become at creating and designing the person you want to become and the life you want to live and create. And it's just a matter of doing the right things with consistency over time. And so play with this, see where we go with it, and we'll look forward to seeing you in future sessions.